Our mission is that all communities are free from reproductive oppression, violence, and racism. Surge mobilizes communities towards making powerful, self-determined choices for their bodies and communities. We center Black women, women of color, and queer and trans people of color for a movement that rises from the bottom up. Reproductive justice is part of every part of one's life, every part of one's decision, because it really boils down to bodily autonomy. If you don't have control over your body, if you don't have access to make decisions that align with what you want to do for yourself and or do for your community, your family, then everything else kind of stops. If you don't have your health, you can't really go forward in life. Health is wealth. So for us, that really is the crux of reproductive justice, and everything else that we do really just extends from that. Us specifically at Surge, it's not the staff per se doing the bulk of the advocacy, if you will. It really is the folks who are in it every day, who are the people who are speaking on their own stories. They're speaking on behalf of themselves and by extension on behalf of their larger community and our larger community, right? So we really see ourselves as the staff side of things, as facilitators who are helping to, maybe infuse some knowledge, talk about some of the ins and outs of legislative processes, things like that, make it more accessible for folks to feel their power in these systems and policy spaces. But ultimately, they're really the ones guiding the work and moving it from point A to point B. The campaigns that we have include the Doulas for All Coalition. So that's a coalition that has a much larger goal of addressing the maternal and perinatal health crisis in this country, specifically for Black, Brown, and Indigenous folks. But in a more tangible goal in the near future is toward having Medicaid reimbursements for doulas in Washington state. For communities, especially low-income communities of color, access to a doula can sometimes be financially impossible because, you have to pay a doula typically out of pocket. But a lot of those families also currently qualify for Medicaid. If there can be Medicaid reimbursements, that helps those families be able to access doulas that look like them. And of course, doulas or birth workers are known to dramatically improve perinatal health outcomes. We have the Black Perinatal Health Campaign. It helps Black folks who have gone through the birthing process to be able to take steps towards addressing those on a systemic level. We also have the Our Words Build Power campaign. It's around queer and trans folks of color, making sense of what healthcare access, equitable healthcare access really looks like in King County. And then last but not least, we have the Decriminalize Washington campaign. This one has a very ambitious goal of decriminalizing sex work in the state of Washington, starting here in King County. So we're working in coalition with several queer and trans and sex worker-led organizations to make that a reality, and specifically organizations that are rooted in communities of color. As far as programs, there's really two I would uplift. One is Just Speak, which is a roughly 3 to 4 times a year community event that brings together political education around reproductive justice and storytelling and performance. I think it was Tony Cade Bambara said we had to make the revolution irresistible. That's the artist's role, is to make the revolution irresistible. And in some ways, this is our attempt at doing that. Folks want to perform, folks want to make sense of their lives and their stories. And then we bring in the reproductive justice lens and also talk to folks beforehand to kind of help them fit some of the things they might share around a theme into the reproductive justice lens. And then last but not least, I would lift up our resource mobilizing program, our cohort program. So the way that we do fundraising at Surge is a little different than other organizations. We try to have our fundraising be in alignment with everything else that we do, and traditional nonprofit fundraising practices tend not to be in alignment. They tend not to be very values-based. So we use a resource mobilizing methodology around our individual donors sort of fundraising. And the resource mobilizing program brings together our reproductive justice political education with our resource mobilizing methodology towards, building up organizers, especially folks who are allies, so looking at like white accomplices, for example, and supporting the work long term. In Washington state, as far as we know, Surge is the only explicitly stated reproductive justice organization in the state. Now, there are a lot of organizations that do reproductive justice, so I don't want to make it sound like we are the only ones doing it. But as far as having it in our mission, having it as our framework, as our methodology, we are the only ones. And that's a fact that's corroborated by some of the national gatherings we've been able to attend. And we've been able to see that not just for Seattle or for Washington, but for the Pacific Northwest, there's not a super strong reproductive justice community out here. And so part of our mission, it sort of feels like our sort of mission that's not stated, right, is advancing reproductive justice awareness and the framework to as many people as possible within, the areas that we touch. And of course, for us, that is Washington. Just continuing to expand it and bring people into this movement. We're about to go and move into our new organizational house, having that brick and mortar physical location that folks can know, like, that's where Surge is. So if we got to talk about reproductive justice, that's where it's happening. That I think is so critical, especially in a place like Seattle.